You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the first off-season 2023 edition of the Colts Blue Zone podcast. We appreciate you all tuning in. Alongside Mike Chappell and Joe Hopkins, I'm Dave Griffiths. The 2022 season is over. And as a year, the 2022 year from January to December has to be one of the worst years that you can remember in Indianapolis Colts history. Chap, I know there were some pretty poor ones in those early 90s, but to go from where they were at the start of 22 in January with 2 straight losses to end the season, and then with the high expectations they had at the start of the 2022 season, only to end it in such disastrous fashion, we'll get into a lot of where to go from here in this podcast, but I think we have to begin with just how disappointing this last year has been for everybody inside the building, everyone who listens to us, who's a fan of the Indianapolis Colts. It's just been one disaster after another that has led them to a really precarious position, picking in the top 5 of the draft once again.
Yeah, when anyone points out how bad the season was, I said, I was here for 1991 and 1-15 when they scored like 140 points. But this is different, because, like you said, the high expectations locally, but nationally. In Vegas, remember, this team was the slight favorite to win the division. So that's what makes this mess such a mess, is that everyone had their sights set so high, and the Matt Ryan was going to be the guy that could finally stop the carousel for at least 2 years. And they had made the moves, and the offensive line, and Jonathan Taylor. That's what makes this so hard. They've won 4 of their last 19 games. They didn't beat Houston this year. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, and they had 2 shots. So, yeah, this will rank as one of the all-timers. 1-15 is going to go a long way for me because of how bad it was. But when you pile on everything that went into this year, this will be top 2 or 3 all time.
Well, we had General Manager Chris Ballard addressing the media this week. We had interim head coach Jeff Saturday addressing the media this week. We'll get really into the nitty-gritty of everything they had to say, but it is fitting that we should start, Joe, with kind of wrapping up how the season came to a conclusion. As Mike just said, another loss or another not win, I guess, against the Houston Texans to go winless against the Houston Texans this season with and with the lead, with a 7-point lead late in the fourth quarter, and then you allow the Texans to drive down, convert multiple fourth downs, and score, get the 2-point conversion, and that's how that is it was a disheartening season and a disheartening end to everyone who was hoping for positive results for the Colts.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, myself included, were kind of rooting for the loss, more worried about the draft pick, but for the players and coaches, it's got to be embarrassing to have Houston, who a lot of people consider the worst team in the league. I guess technically that'd be Chicago, but have Houston, I don't know, tie you and then beat you in that fashion, especially in your own home stadium. It's kind of one thing, season opener, wonky things can happen early in the season, but at the end of like that, the fashion that they lost, it's got to be a tough one for those players out there, especially Rodney Thomas. I bet he's been thinking day after day, if he just timed his jump a little differently, he could add the game-ending interception or knockdown.
And Rodney led the Colts this year with 4 interceptions as a rookie, as a 7th-round pick. Heck, when he was taken, it almost seemed like a throwaway near the end of the draft because they'd already taken a safety earlier, and at that point, the Colts still had Khari Willis on the roster along with Julian Blackmon. So I was like, why are they taking another safety? Rodney Thomas stepped in, had a tremendous year for a rookie 7th-round pick. But I will also say, Chap, and I know that Rodney doesn't think this way, nor should he, but if he turns out to be the quote-unquote hero that missed that interception that allowed the Bears to get the number 1 pick, maybe the Colts trade up to number 1 and get the quarterback of the future, then Rodney Thomas becomes the true savior of the Indianapolis Colts moving forward.
His head's not right there yet.
Exactly.
Can't be. But no, you're right. I go back to like in 97 when the Colts were beating the Minnesota Vikings with Jim Harbaugh, and they beat the heck out of him and win, and the Vikings win, and then out west things happen. All of a sudden, the Colts have got the first pick because of things happening. So maybe they'll put Rodney Thomas in the Ring of Honor for delivering the first overall pick, and but you go back and look at that, and you mentioned, Joe mentioned it, 4th and 12, 4th and 20, 4th and 20, and they convert both, and then they get the 2-point conversion. That's how to end this season. I mean, how else? The Colts all the way to the end, and the silver lining is they're fourth, and the Bears are first. The Bears don't need a quarterback, so we'll see what the cost is to go up and get the first pick, because the Colts won't be the only team interested in that first pick.
Speaking of Rodney Thomas, I thought it'd be fitting, since we discussed last week that very positive update on his good friend and someone he considers his brother, Damar Hamlin, released from the hospital. Just got that news maybe a couple hours ago, so that's very encouraging for his status. He seems to be making great strides in his recovery.
Absolutely tremendous. Thank you to everyone, all the medical personnel on the field, the doctors at UC, and all the prayers that came in across the nation, across the world, all the thoughts from everyone who sent them Rodney's way, not Rodney's way, excuse me, Damar's way, and Rodney among the chief of them to send his and to be there personally. So that's certainly a burden lifted off of Rodney's heart, off of so many of our hearts. The recovery is just beginning, I think, for Damar, but I'm so encouraged by how they've only taken steps forward, it seems. So that's awesome, really awesome to see, and hopefully we'll see more from Damar in the future. The 2022 Colts finished this season 4-12-1. They were 1-10 over their last 11 games. As Chap points out, they've won 4 games in their last 19. They've lost 7 games in a row to end the season. Lost last 7 games of the season for the first time since 1953, which was their inaugural season in the NFL. Joe, you have some great stats here. Second fewest points per game, 17. They have the worst worst point differential in the league, 138, and I believe about 90 of those came after Jeff Saturday joined on to be head coach after the first 9 games of the season. They had the most turnovers in the league with 34. They had the second most sacks allowed with 60. They were 30th in red zone scoring. They were last in red zone defense. You don't win games when your stats are that bad. And those are some of the stats, Joe, the coaches point to week about, like, hey, we were really good in red zone scoring. Hey, we were really good in turnovers. That's why we were able to win. When all of them come to a head like this at the end of the year, it was a disastrous season.
Yeah, and, I probably could have guessed most of these. I was surprised by red zone defense just because the defense had been so good throughout the year. But I guess when a team got driving, they finished those drives on them. So just all around situations in the game, even before, the blowouts towards the end of the season, a lot of these games were somewhat close, and it seemed to be those key situations, red zones, third downs, where the Colts really just failed. No other way to say it. They just failed, and those, with the talent level of just about every team being so high in the NFL, those key situations are what separate the good teams from the bad teams.
Yeah, Chap, I think a question that I remember I asked Gus Bradley at the beginning of the season was somewhat about this, about like winning situations. You could still have a good defense if you win situations, but the Colts might have had they had a decent defense at times this year, and especially in the first half of the year before things imploded under Jeff Saturday's watch down the stretch, when they averaged giving up 10 more points per game than they did before he got there. But they were situationally not good all year, and that's one reason why they finished 4-12-1 on the season.
Yeah, and it's not an excuse, it's a reason, but the defense wore down. They simply wore down from carrying this team all season, and injuries piled up when you're losing Ngakoue and Kenny Moore and Isaiah Rodgers and on, Tyquan Lewis. So you really had a shell of your defense out there, and I thought it was amazing that they were close to having a franchise record with sacks generated, and I never got that feeling that this was a strong pass rush team. I guess it just kind of crept up on us. And you talked about situationally How about 4th and 1? I mean, a couple of 4th and 1s, and maybe they're drafting 6th. Because we talked situationally, they dropped. The defense gave up 4 fourth-quarter game-winning drives in the last 7 games. So this is one where no one pointed fingers in this locker room because everyone was to blame. Everyone was. And we'll see how big the blow-up is in the offseason. We know there'll be a new coach. I think we think there'll be a new head coach. We'll see if it's Jeff Saturday or not. But a lot of changes are coming personnel-wise, I think. Certainly at quarterback, but everything they did during this season shouted out that they had to make major changes going into the offseason.
What does Hancock Health's membership in the Mayo Clinic Care Network mean for you? It means our independent health network now has access to the knowledge and resources of the world leader in medicine. It means your Hancock Health doctor can now consult with Mayo Clinic specialists to confirm a diagnosis or treatment plan. And it means that together, we're making health possible for you. Learn more about our new clinical collaboration at hancockregional.org/Mayo Clinic. Need new windows? Contact your hometown team today. Hometown Window and Doors are Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Anderson window dealer with master installers. From design to installation, the Hometown team handles it all. They carry unlimited options with competitive pricing. Call them direct to get 25% off your windows if you call within the next 60 days. Hometown Windows and Doors gives you all the perks of a national brand with a hometown feel. Visit them at hometownwindowteam.com today. Now, as we enter this offseason, guys, I personally just don't think you can understand where the Colts are without looking back a little ways in a couple seasons. And obviously, the direction, the path that this Colts franchise has been on since Andrew Luck's retirement is really the last real watershed moment in this franchise's history. So Andrew retires, and they start 5-2 under Jacoby Brissett that year, which was a really great start. Jacoby gets hurt. He's really not the same down the stretch, and he's hesitant to throw the ball deep all the time anyway. And Adam Vinatieri, unfortunately, has his last season in the NFL. And then you enter the 2019 to 2020 offseason, which is when COVID hits. So 2020 comes along, and you have Phillip Rivers now as your quarterback. So Rivers is your QB. You go to the playoffs, have a pretty darn good year at 11-5. You barely squeak into the playoffs at 11-5. And moving on from Rivers, once he decided he didn't want to come back another year, is another important moment, obviously, with the Colts and where they are now. So after that season, as efficient as Rivers was, he also did not attack downfield at all. And that's something that Frank Reich wanted. And that's something that Chris Ballard wanted. That's something that everyone in the Colts organization wanted, to get a quarterback who could attack the ball, attack downfield better. And you had some really encouraging first signs with Jonathan Taylor at the end of his first year. You figure you have a good running game. They go out and they get Carson Wentz. They pair him with Frank Reich yet again. And to me, a really important, like that offseason, there was something really important that happened. Joe, what?
Well, in that offseason, Costanzo also retired as well.
Yes. That's important to bring up as well. Thank you. Costanzo retires. I think my first sign of concern with the leadership and direction of this franchise after Andrew Luck's retirement came that offseason when they decided not to have OTAs, basically, or not to have the minicamp, because they had a quarterback coming off a disappointing year, bringing him in, trying to get readjusted to a new community, new team, new players. And I know it was a different time in 2021, and the lingering effects of COVID were still there. But that wasn't something that happened everywhere across the NFL, that people canceled OTAs and voluntary minicamps. A couple teams did it, but it was not widespread, from my recollection. The Colts decided at that point that it was more important to keep everyone at home And when I say the Colts, I mean Jim Irsay, Frank Reich, Chris Ballard. Those are the three that are making this big decision. The players can go to them all they want and ask for that time off. If they get told no, if the proper leadership structure tells them no, you have to come, we need to get this quarterback up to speed with everybody here, then it's a completely different, I think, scenario to start the year when they started 1-4, because you get to training camp and then Carson hurts his foot and then he's a COVID close contact near the end of camp. He just had so little time to prepare, and so they started the season so poorly. And it left them with very little wiggle room near the end of the year when they truly did collapse at the end of that year, which was everybody's fault. And the franchise, once again, the leadership coming from the top, tried to pin that on Carson. And we know now, looking back, that it was so much more than that. You can still say, you can be much different than my belief that Carson was a very small part of the problem. You can think that he was a bigger part of the problem and still recognize that the leadership structure of the Colts at that time really was playing the blame game to put so much of the blame on him and ignore other problems that have now crept up this year, obvious problems that have crept up this year. So you get rid of Carson, you have no idea what you're going to do at quarterback, and Matt Ryan comes to you. And then all of a sudden, they're singing his praises. They think he's going to be here for 2. Jim Irsay say 4 years that Matt Ryan's going to be here, maybe beyond that, something like that. And if you listen to us on this podcast, you knew what I was saying, that Matt Ryan had one good year in his last 5 seasons in the NFL. One positive year. That was it. And his entire career, he was throwing to multiple Hall of Famers, Tony Gonzalez and Julio Jones, and he was going to come here and throw to who? And those questions, unfortunately, were the right questions to ask. And I think I can say that looking back at the time, that I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I will. Toot. I was more right in this scenario than a lot of the national prognosticators who thought the Colts were one of the favorite teams in the AFC because, hey, Matt Ryan's there, and he can turn things around and all that stuff. Matt Ryan comes, and things continue to go downhill. Frank Reich is fired. Jim Irsay is making decisions instead of Chris Ballard or Frank Reich because he sees that there is dysfunction in his organization, and you can give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's trying to fix this dysfunction by making some decisions that maybe are not technically in his wheelhouse to make, even though he has the power to make them as owner. But everything just collapses down the stretch under Jeff Saturday. They finish 1-7 under his tutelage, 0-7 the last 7 games, and now the Colts are in the position where they're in. To me, like I said, Chap, I think you really have to go back all the way to that Andrew Luck decision to fully understand the position the Colts are in now. You have to see these problems that have crept up over the last few years as the clear fence posts along the road to where the Colts have wound up, and understanding all of that has to be paramount in where the Colts move forward from here with a head coach and changing things in-house under Chris Ballard, and maybe he should do things differently here in-house, because what has happened under these years, under the post-Luck years in Indianapolis, has been nothing short of an utter disappointment for what this franchise has come to expect of itself, really since the turn of the century, and the greatness obviously under Manning and the positive start to Andrew Luck's career. It has been nothing but real strong disappointment, I think, since then, which is where we find ourselves now.
Somehow, and I think these things happen gradually. It's always talked about the culture of a team, the culture of a franchise, how it's built so strong. Well, certainly the Peyton Manning Colts had a great culture. They were a great team. But you can have a good culture, a strong culture, and not be a great team or a good team. But this team, somewhere along the way, probably all the way along the way, they kept eroding. Something kept eroding internally, whether it was leadership, whether it was discipline, I don't know what it was. But Chris Ballard talked about this yesterday, and we'll get into it more, but how when things really got close, when things got tight, this team's confidence melted away. That was his term. that's just a damning critique of your team. And I thought what spoke volumes about this team, and we've talked about it, but it just tells you how this team is built, is when you've got Nick Foles on the floor trying to breathe, and you got the guy who put him there celebrating right next to him, and no one did anything. I'm telling you, back in the Jeff Saturday days as a player, somebody would have got thrown out of the game because they would have drilled Thibodeau. They would have. And if you go back and listen to, well, Jeff Saturday said, hey, we protect our own. And that's kind of as far as he took it. Well, I'm going to talk to him. Go back and listen to how Chris Ballard answered that question yesterday. And I'm telling you, he said the same thing, but he wanted to say so much more. He wanted to take this team to task, wanted to take the offensive line to task, and that's just a snapshot of what's missing. And I don't know if it's as simple as saying the OTAs and all that. I think it was so many things along the way where things just eroded, and here's where we are. And it got to the point the last half of the season where you didn't expect them to make a stop. You didn't expect them to make 4th and 1. You expected the worst because that's what they gave you. Good teams, even marginal teams, find ways to win. Bad teams find ways to lose, and darn it, this team didn't do that.
Yeah, Joe, this it's been you don't go from where the Colts were to where the Colts are like that, you know. It's kind of one step at a time. And I think some of the frustration is seeing the slow progression from where they were to where they are. And I think the Thibodeau case that Chap brings up is very much it's a perfect example of where the franchise has fallen, because it just is such a juxtaposition, like he said, from where they were, what would have happened in that scenario a couple years ago, to where they are now, where nothing happens out there and it seems almost blasé. It seems whatever. It's like, okay. And so yeah, that's, I guess, what are your thoughts? But Joe's like, I have so many thoughts.
Where do I start? I think you're correct. And the definitive turning point beyond Andrew Luck retiring, obviously, is the Carson Wentz experiment. And one guy really disliked Carson Wentz, and that was the most important guy, Jim Irsay. And I think there's a lot of guys in that locker room who did like Carson Wentz. I know Michael Pittman Jr. being one of them, the number one receiver. And so I think maybe this is just speculation. Obviously, without being in that locker room, it's hard to point the finger at what caused some of the erosion of culture. But maybe the conflict between the owner and what he thought or of the quote-unquote franchise quarterback, the guy you brought in to be here for 4, 5, 6 years, kind of created a rift within that locker room. The other thing is even kind of taking a step back from that. When Andrew Luck retired, this was a team that was built to win. I mean, there was so much in place. I'm not going to say everything was in place, but there was a lot in place for this team to win. There's been teams go on runs with less talent. And when he was plucked out of the equation, the Colts, understandably so, I get the reasoning, but kind of kept going back to Band-Aids rather than kind of going the patient route to do it the right way to go get your quarterback. Because very rare, we've all said it, there's a reason these quarterbacks are available. They're either near the end of their careers, they're past their prime, or because for whatever reason you want to pick out, the original team who had that quarterback has determined that that's not the guy. And so when you do that year after year and just keep putting Band-Aids on the most important position, the position that's not only touching the ball every down, but supposed to be your leader, at least on offense, it's going to have a great effect on the rest of the team. And this year needed to happen. Even if Matt Ryan was decent and brought them to the playoffs and they lost in the first or second round, I don't think anyone thought this was a series going to be able to contend with the Chiefs and the Bills and the Bengals. At the end of the day, for the Colts to get that next guy, that next quarterback, they were going to have a bad season to put themselves in this draft position to go get that quarterback, because time and time again, we keep saying nothing matters until you find that guy.
So here we are with the Colts at the 4th overall pick, 4-12-1. Chicago is first, Houston is second, Arizona is third. When you look at that group, Houston is the only group above the Colts that really wants a quarterback. But at the same time, if you're the Colts and you think, well, I think that there are 2 franchise quarterbacks here. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, it's Bryce Young and it's C.J. Stroud, Chap, the 2 guys that nationally are kind of viewed as 1-2. If you go beyond that, whether it's Will Levis, Hendon Hooker, Anthony Richardson, whoever it might be, but if it's just those 2, and even if the Colts say, hey, we think there's 2 of them, I don't think you can confidently stay put at number 4 and just think, oh, well, somebody will drop to us because Houston's the only team above us who wants a quarterback, because there's always the chance that somebody who's currently behind you leaps up into that top 4 to get a quarterback that they love so much, that a price that they're willing to pay. And when Chris Ballard was asked about drafting a quarterback, he said that we have to be right, and he said that he would not be opposed to trading a big heap if there is a guy up there that he loves. And I just personally think that that's what you're going to have to do if there is a quarterback that you love in this draft. And we're at the point, Chap, where there has to be a quarterback that the Colts love in this draft. It just feels like this has to be the year.
There's not a chance someone jumps up in front of you. It will happen. If you sit there, you're going to get probably the 3rd best quarterback, because people are going to jump up and get that. And, the question is, what are you willing to pay to get that number 1 pick? For the most part, whatever it takes. And I suppose there's got to be something you're not willing to do, because back in the day, the Colts gave up an awful lot to get the number 1 pick and to get Jeff George, and they give up their left tackle and their best receiver. That's tough. That's hamstringing your quarterback. But you're going to have to do almost whatever it takes to get the guy, because until, like we said, I hope to get the right coach. I hope he's a motivator. I hope he's a leader. He can do all. But if you haven't got the quarterback, it just doesn't matter. We've seen that forever, not only here but everywhere else. And what drives this too, we've talked about this before, what really infuriates everyone is it seems like everybody else has got their quarterback. They see Burrow, Herbert, Allen, Mahomes. They see these young quarterbacks and they say, I want one of those. Well, here you are. You've got a chance to get one. And I think the important dynamic is, again, the Bears don't need one. And you've got a pretty good relationship with the Bears. You really do. And this probably would be picks plus players, probably. But the problem is other teams probably, from a pick-wise, no doubt, other teams will have more ammunition pick-wise to jump in front of you. But Kenny Moore, DeForest Buckner, it would really pain Ballard to part with Buck. I'm telling you, it would. He said, was it yesterday? He said, I'd love to have X number of Bucks on my team, because that's what you want. But you've got to do what you do. They probably had, in hindsight, was it maybe one realistic chance of getting a quarterback in the draft, and was it 20?
That's what Ballard said the other day, that 2020 was probably their chance if they wanted to get a quarterback in the draft. Yeah. So,
but this is the time. It's one thing for the fan base and the media, but the media we don't matter. But to be angry with where this team is and the direction when you don't have a direction, and that's where anger turns to apathy, and then you're really screwed as a franchise. But if you give him the draft pick, if you give him the quarterback and say, listen, 2023 might be a tough year, it might be record-wise, but this is what we've got. And as long as you're building towards something and you've got something to build around, I think the fan base is pretty tolerant. But they've got to come out of this draft with a quarterback, a legit quarterback. And on top of that, we can get to it later, they're going to need another veteran. They're going to need the next bridge to wherever they want to go. But they will do within reason, not within reason. They're going to do whatever it takes to get that first pick.
Let's talk about that because, Houston they have 2 first-round picks. The other one's at 12. They have a lot more, I guess, just pure draft ammunition to move up. And then if Chicago goes back to 2, they might be willing to trade again. Chicago needs a lot. They need a lot, and they've got their quarterback. So do the Colts then trade up to 2 if they value the second quarterback, whether that's Levis or Stroud? I'm assuming at the point right now that Bryce Young goes number 1, but that could change things as a draft.
They always do.
They always do.
But you better love both of them.
Yeah, you're right.
If you don't go to 1, you better really not Manning Leaf. I mean, we saw how number 2 worked on that one, but you better be just beyond positive that number 2 is as good as number 1, or you got to go to 1. You just have to.
Like you look at different years, and you look back to the 20. What was it? It was the 2018 draft. It was the one where the Colts got Quentin Nelson, Shaquille Leonard, and Braden Smith. So it was a really good draft. But it was Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold went up there near the top. And then Josh Allen fell down to number 7, and the Bills trade up to get him. And Josh Allen was just there were opinions from the full range of the spectrum on what Josh Allen could do. And what did the Bills do? They got the right coaching staff to coach him. They got the right guys to tell him what to do. So, this is, Chap, we look at these two things separately, and we have to analyze them in a sense separately, the draft and where the Colts are going with their head coaching search. But ultimately, those two they have to be meshed together. They have to be intertwined together. You have to be completely on the same page between who the next head coach is and how they can coach this next quarterback that's going to come in, or else it could be a failure like both the Browns saw with Baker Mayfield, the Jets saw with Sam Darnold. You need the Brian Daboll as offensive coordinator and Ken Dorsey as quarterback coach, whoever that might be here in Indiana, to make whatever quarterback work.
Well, take it all the way back to, was it 2002 with David Carr, when the Texans beat the football out of him. So, again, and these guys are smart enough to know that you've got to have the quarterback, you've got to have the coach who understands that this is where his meal ticket is. This is where his career is tied to, and then the next spot is building the offense around him. It's seldom does a quarterback come into a really good situation because you're picking number 1 or 2 for a reason. Go back and look, and this was a little bit different. Go back and look when Peyton Manning came here in '98. Team wasn't very good. Boy, they were loaded on offense. They had the offensive line. They had tackles. They had Marvin Harrison. They had Falk. They had tight ends. So the guy coming in here next year will have some of that, but not all of it. You've got to be committed to adding another receiver, making sure your left tackle is good enough, and we'll see if he is. So it takes total commitment by the franchise, or you're simply wasting your time and players' careers.
And a sign of total commitment, Joe, would be trading up to number 1 for sure. And really, to get back to your point, your question about moving up to 1, if Houston has the 2 and the 12 right now that they can trade up to 1, I think the price for the Colts starts. I think it starts moving up to 1 with their pick at number 4, Kenny Moore and Shaquille Leonard. I think that is the floor for what they would trade up to get to number 1, because those are 2 players for Matt Eberflus's defense that he knows work well in his defense. Those are 2 crucial positions to his defense. And if the Bears move down to 4, there's a chance they can draft Jalen Carter, there out of Georgia to be that DeForest Buckner, to be that 3-technique guy in the middle, and they can have those 3 key positions on the Eberflus defense, and then they can work their offense whatever they want. But that's where I think, like I said, the floor is for getting up to number 1. If you want to trade your first pick and then 2-star players. Other than that, you're going to have to go into picks for next year. You're going to have to go into 2nd, 3rd round picks.
I would say that add next year's first-round pick on top of that, and that's the floor in my mind.
Yeah. I'm trying to be conservative here. I think that if you're a Colts fan out there, you have to get in your head right now. The price is going to be steep to get up to number 1.
In a lot of things I'm hearing from, obviously not people with the Bears, but Chicago side, is the conversation starts at 3 first-round picks. And that might not make as much sense if you're the Colts at 4, but the Bears, who need so much, there's teams down the list here. Vegas at 7, Atlanta at 8, Carolina at 9. You look at the Jets at 13. Who could give you 3 first-round picks? Trey Lance. It took 3 first-round picks for the 49ers to trade up to get Trey Lance at 3.
Yep.
I knew they moved up from 12 to 3 first-round picks. And I understand if you include players that the Bears put a first-round pick value on, then you have to give up less. And I think a big question that it's going to come down to for the Colts in terms of compensation is, in their minds, what is their timeline? Are they kind of rebuilding and they're going to be another 2 to 3 years out? Because then all of a sudden a DeForest Buckner becomes expendable. He turns 29 this offseason. He's got several good years of football left in him. But if you're grooming a young quarterback and not really seriously competing quite yet, those years are going to be wasted here on this defense. You might as well trade them to go get your quarterback. Kenny Moore as well. I mean, Kenny Moore is a good player. I don't think he has any more value around the league than he does in Chicago.
Mm-hmm, I agree with you. And I love Kenny. He's
a very specific fit for a defense, and Matt Eberflus was able to get the most out of him. So I think maybe the conversation with Chicago starts at this year's first, next year's first, Buckner and Kenny. Obviously, maybe Darius is included. I guess it depends on how confident the Bears feel about his health. They weren't willing to pay Roquan Smith, so why are they going to pay Darius $20 million?
Good question.
When you can't even guarantee that he's going to be on the field. So, and then the Bears could always go with the 4th pick and either add, put Carter next to Buckner or Will Anderson out of Alabama, or trade down again. The Bears are in a great spot right now.
Yeah, the Bears are in the catbird seat, no doubt. They're going to be far different next year, and they're going to have a whole lot more talent on their roster next year.
They will be singing Lovie Smith's praises for years to come.
They're going to put Rodney Thomas in their Ring of Honor there in Chicago.
Someone told me Lovie Smith is still a sleeper agent for the Bears.
That's what I've been told. Indeed,
but I'm completely of the mindset that this needs somewhat of a rebuild. I'm not saying a fire sale, but I've come around to the idea of trading Buckner because you get that young quarterback, you're probably going to be at least 2 to 3 years away from seriously competing anyway. So do what you got to do to get that star quarterback. Don't degrade the offense. Trade away the defensive players. I'm fine with a bad defense as long as you build up that offense and give your quarterback every chance possible to be successful.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too, Joe, and to you, Chap. I would much rather trade away defensive players than offensive players because you want your quarterback to have the most potential of success possible. So I think overall there is no one who is off limits if you're trading up to number 1. No one specific player, offense or defense. But I would much rather, if I was a Colts fan, see a defensive player go rather than offensive players in this scenario.
Yeah, again, the worst. I go back to 90 when they get rid of Chris Hinton and Andre Rison, and then that's part of the reason that Jeff George didn't fail. Just part of the reason. But yeah, don't get rid of don't gut your offense and then wonder why your young quarterback isn't working. And while I would hate to see Buck go, I think he is an elite defensive tackle, top 5, and you could argue where you set him in there. But like Joe said, and like I've mentioned, this will not be a quick turnaround. Ideally, in that second year, you'll see something, but not where you need it to be. So you have to be careful what you get rid of, but only to a point. Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, I wouldn't. I know you can get running backs. I know you can get
Especially
receivers.
not Pitt.
And Pitt, boy, they did him such a disservice this year. Now, he didn't help himself he lacks the great speed and he doesn't get you great separation, but for a team that couldn't throw the ball down the field, they turned him into Jack Doyle. And it's great to have Jack Doyle be like 7.9, but Michael Pittman being like 9.3 a catch is ridiculous.
Did you find it interesting that Ballard refused to call him a number one during the press conference?
Well, I think it's depending on how you read it. He said he's not elite. But he didn't verify that he's a one, but he said there's a few elite guys. I think you can be a one but not be elite. I've always had, and I still do, doubts that he's a true one. I think he would be really, really good if you had a stud one to go along with him. But, boy, I just think he's lacking that top-end speed, and to me that's what a one is. It's a guy that if you're not careful, he'll drop 150 on you. And I just don't know. Maybe they've soured me a little bit on Pitt by the way they not underused him, just because this is a function of the offense, of a bad passing game. I hesitated on T.Y. for several years on him being a one, and he proved me wrong. I'm sort of there with Pitt. I need to see more to think he's a one.
And I think that every single Colts fan has seen what a true one receiver is, whether it was with T.Y. or with Marvin and Reggie before that. Like you can't fool the people here in town as to what is a one receiver or not. There is no pulling the wool over their eyes. Like and Pitt, you don't know whether he is yet. That's just the truth. And I thought this last year would have been crucial in his development. And Joe, you mentioned earlier about Pitt and Carson Wentz. There was no one, I think, on this roster that was more disappointed to see Carson Wentz go than Pitt, because he got the ball a lot. He got the ball deep a lot. That was a great relationship between those two that they had. Like, it worked between them. And this year, Pittman was not able to show his full skill set. He just wasn't. There's no other way to say it, that he was truly handicapped, as was this entire offense, by the quarterback, by the offensive line, by the lack of a running game, by everything. So it was a horrible season for Pittman to have right before the last year of your contract when you're going in to negotiate a new deal.
Yeah, and they couldn't even get him one more catch so he could get to 100.
And they couldn't even throw him a freaking bubble screen, a touch pass. Yeah, it would have been spoon feeding, but they spoon fed Reggie and Dallas Clark in 2009. I think Dallas Clark got his 100 catch on a minus 7 yard catch. It can be done, and I realize he had other opportunities and all that, but holy smokes, get your guy one more, no matter how cheesy it would have been.
Need new windows? Let the Hometown team help. Hometown Windows and Doors is Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Andersen dealer with master installers. From design to installation, we handle it all, carrying nationally known brands like Andersen with more options and competitive pricing. Call us direct and get 25% off your windows if you buy within the next 60 days.
Please contact your Hometown team today. We are Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Andersen dealer.
National brand, hometown feel.
The story of Hancock Health is all about you and everything you need to live your healthiest life. Like Hancock Regional, one of the nation's safest hospitals, and an independent health network with over 70 doctors at more than 30 locations around East Central Indiana. We're growing and evolving to help further your story. And we're just getting started. See all the ways Hancock Health and you can work together to make health possible at hancockhealth.org.
Let's turn our attention for the rest of our podcast to the head coaching search, because we've already talked so much. I do want to give some time to this. Jeff Saturday did speak with the media on Monday after finishing off his time as interim head coach. The only thing he'll be now is head coach. That interim tag will be gone. And Jeff says that he still wants the long-term head coaching job. He says he has a clear vision of how to turn the team around. And he said also, Chap, that like you could be more the pessimistic side and say that he was making excuses for going 1-7 down the stretch. You could be more the understanding side and say that, well, he came on midseason. There's not a whole lot he can do. And that's kind of the line that he was feeding the media. That's the line that Chris Ballard was feeding the media, that you really don't want to make too many changes. So suffice to say, if Saturday gets the job, things will be markedly different. But he physically showed, actually with results showed, no reason why he should be the head coach in the future. And I don't want to sugarcoat that at all, because that's really kind of what both he and Ballard were hinting at in this week's press conference, that what he has done in the past is not going to be that important. It's going to be the vision he can cast for the future, because he wasn't able to do all that much, so they say, this year to turn things around. So I think that the 1-7 record, in their minds, at least what they're saying, is not all that relevant. From my perspective, like I said, it really didn't show much of what he can do. They talk about him being a leader, but the defense went from giving 20 points a game to 30 points a game. The team collapsed down the stretch. We said earlier that in the most important moments, they found themselves lacking. Like, to me, those are signs that leadership was lacking somewhat on this team, and that things were not right down the stretch. I'm not putting everything on Saturday, because I think the weight of this season really got to everyone on this team, but I also didn't see things that they're alluding to, that Jeff showed great leadership. And I'm sure there's things that behind the scenes that we are not privy to that he did, that he's tried to strive to hold players accountable here and there. But at the same time, when you look at actual tangible results on the field, Saturday was 1-7 with a team that kept collapsing week after week and led to one of the most disappointing finishes to the season in franchise history.
Yeah, it was like, listening to Jeff and Chris Ballard, it was like the old Dallas series on Who Shot JR. That is, what didn't it end up being, that it was all made up? I mean, it
was all a dream.
It was all a dream, and that's what they're saying here is, don't,
spoiler alert,
don't pay attention to what you just watched for the last 2 months. And I think Chris was actually asked, what were the improvements? You know, what do you point to? And he mentioned, like you said, the behind the scenes, how you handle the day-to-day and the practices and running the team and interaction, which is fine. But they fired Frank Reich because he had a bad record and they didn't like the direction of the team. And it will be very, very, I was going to say difficult, but interesting. If Jeff Saturday's the head coach, I want to hear Jim Irsay sit up there that day and say, this is our head coach and this is why. I just don't know how they do it. And I think deep down, Jim Irsay really, really wants Jeff Saturday to be his head coach. At some level he does. Now, has that lessened recently? I don't know. But what's going to look even worse, and we're talking optics here, is you're going to bring in 4, 5, 6 guys, and you guys will talk about this in a minute, and they've got resumes. I mean, they've done things. And I realize Jeff hasn't had the time, but he also doesn't have the resume. So I'm interested to see how they go. And I thought early on that they really, really wanted Jeff to be their head coach. I still sort of think that, but I just don't know how you sit there and say, and this is why. This is a guy that we want. He's a great leader. He's a great motivator. He's a great person. He simply doesn't have the chops yet to be a good head coach because he hasn't had the opportunity.
Speaking to players, Joe, in the locker room, a bunch of them were very positive about Jeff Saturday, and to be honest, that's what you would expect of guys coming out of a season like that and trying to rally around the guy. I wouldn't see anybody talking bad about the interim head coach here down the stretch of the season, but you got like Ryan Kelly, DeForest Buckner, Shaquille Leonard, all said positive things about him. Chris Ballard admitted he's going to be a candidate. Definitely talked about said he had reservations that he expressed to Jim Irsay when Saturday was taking over the job, just because it was an unprecedented situation that they were throwing Saturday into. But now I think a lot of it comes to the vision that he can cast in front of both Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay, when it comes to these interviews, because he's going to get his chance, and he's going to get his chance to say what he would do differently. He's going to get his chance to say what is going wrong inside the building, behind the scenes. And like Chap said, the most powerful man in that building holds Jeff Saturday very close to his heart. So he is going to have, in that sense, a leg up on other candidates. Other candidates are going to have to match and exceed Jeff Saturday's vision because of Jim Irsay's love of him as a person and as a leader.
Yeah, and it's so hard to talk about this in my mind, because we could go through all this. They could interview 20 different coaches, and at the end of the day, Jim Irsay could just go, nah, I like Jeff Saturday, which is basically what he did when he hired him in the first place.
Yep.
So it's very tough. I will say, to me, some of the players' words really kind of struck me, especially Buckner talking about, he said, quote, just the culture and the accountability he brought to the team over the last 8 weeks of the season was tremendous. Kelly said, I don't think you can have Jeff with the current staff. The current staff was all Frank guys. Constant reminder of what used to be here. Leonard spoke up with him and said, you got to understand, he was brought in week 10. He didn't know the coaches from a can of paint. So they very well illustrated everything working against Jeff Saturday. And there was a lot.
Yeah.
There was a lot. And I do think it is important, especially for a lot of your best players. We'll see how many are going to be back next year. I mean, we just talked about shipping half these guys off a minute ago.
We did.
But
that's easy for us to do.
It is.
Shipping players away. We're good at that.
We can do it with just a flick of the wrist and say, whatever.
But the first thing is the players have to be bought in and like him. And at least from their words, it sounds like several of the leaders on this team are. The second thing that's going to be huge in this is, who can he bring in to be offensive and defensive coordinator and special teams coordinator? And that's going to be big for any coach interviewing for a head coaching job, is who are you going to bring in? Who's going to be the rest of your staff? But especially for Jeff, who doesn't have that experience, he's not going to be one grooming a young quarterback. He might groom a young left tackle like Ryman or something like that, but he's going to have to bring in people who he can count on to really run the X's and O's in the techniques, while he focuses more on the culture and accountability and performs more of the CEO role. How many guys are going to? I get there's a limited number of jobs, but from the poop show, I'll put it, that's been the Indianapolis Colts over the past year and a half, how many guys are going to jump at this opportunity? I don't know.
When you go ahead, Chap. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing, and it's great if the players like the coach. That's great. But what is so imperative is that the head coach and the GM get along. I mean, they have to. I mean, we saw somehow Polian and Dungy worked. I mean, it's still one of the amazing things that have happened in NFL history that they worked. It worked. But
the odd couple.
But go back to the introductory press conference with Jeff Saturday, how Chris Ballard said we had, was it strident discussions? I think was the discussion, was what he said. And that he mentioned to Jim Irsay how unprecedented it was. He was not in favor of bringing in Jeff Saturday, probably because he was not in favor of firing Frank. But the head coach and the GM have got to be in lockstep. And the way Chris told us yesterday is he will lead the head coaching search, but Jim Irsay will have the final say, which is the way it should be. It's his team and all that. But you better be darn sure that the guy that you hire as head coach there's got to be a better phrase, and get along with, but have the same vision of how a team operates and the roles and all that, or this won't work.
Speaking of, I think this guy right here who the Colts are interviewing for the head coaching role shows who Chris Ballard would have made interim head coach.
That would be Bubba Ventrone, and reports are today that he's going to be the first really interview here, that he's going today as we speak on Wednesday as we tape this podcast, interviewing for the head coaching role. Other than him, the Colts have requested permission reportedly to interview several other coaches. Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, and defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. and Broncos defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero. All of them players that the Colts have requested to interview so far. Those are a couple of initial names. Chris Ballard says that he wants to take his time with this. He doesn't care if he goes into mid-February, which, heck, Frank didn't come in here until mid-February because of the whole McDaniels situation. And Frank, at that time, wasn't even taking interviews because the Eagles were on their way to a Super Bowl championship, and he wanted to focus on that. So he wouldn't have interviewed anyway until after the Super Bowl was over. I think Chris went through that scenario and realized, okay, we can wait. We can be patient. We can still put together a great draft and a great team the next year if you have the right pieces available. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is just the beginning. If they keep going and look at if you're looking at guys who have coached young quarterbacks, you look at Brian Callahan as the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, who's been with Joe Burrow. You look at Ken Dorsey, who's the offensive coordinator in Buffalo, who's been with Josh Allen. If you want more defensive guys, DeMeco Ryans keeps coming up as a defensive coordinator, rather, the 49ers player. You look at Leslie Frazier, who's been a head coach before, who's the Bills defensive coordinator. There are so many people who have experience, unlike Jeff Saturday, and who will certainly are, I think, in this cycle in line for head coaching interviews, and it's the Colts' duty to really dive into all of them.
Yeah, the one caution I've always had on getting that hot offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator is he's not bringing his guys with him. That's you got to be careful that they could be they probably are a great coordinator, but the job's a lot easier when you got Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and you got all pros playing defense for you. So, but one thing about the Colts is if they find out early in the process that this is who they want, I'm not saying Jeff, I'm just saying anybody, then sort of go ahead and do it. If there's 2 or 3 guys that you're kind of hot on or whatever, maybe that guy goes somewhere else. So, you always risk losing the guy you want if you wait. But if it takes that long, it takes that long. This isn't like free agency with players to where if you snooze, you lose. So I do think that this will take a while unless they just know who they're going to hire and, like Joe said, we're going to go this way, which I don't think they'll do. I think this is going to take a while. It'll drive us and the fan base crazy. But that you got to get it right. You got to get it right, and sometimes it takes longer than what fans and the outsiders want to get it right, but you got to get the right guy.
Yeah, Joe, this is an offseason where the Colts have to get it right twice. They need the right head coach, and then, of course, he needs to put together his entire staff. That needs to be right, and they need to get the right quarterback. I'll amend something I said earlier, like saying this needs to be the season that the Colts get the quarterback or draft a quarterback. Maybe not draft a quarterback, but get a quarterback. If it's not Bryce Young, it's Lamar Jackson. If you could swing that somehow, then I'm fine with that. But that means $300 million guaranteed.
Are you starting something here?
No, I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying that
Colts fans have already started it on Twitter, from what I've seen.
Exactly.
I believe Derek Carr is going to be available.
No, please don't. No.
Joe's just like, please no. Jimmy Garoppolo will be available again, probably, for the 18th season in a row.
That's not long term. That's like 3 years. I mean,
I know.
And Jim Irsay, Aaron Rodgers. I saw somebody send out some odds, one of these Vegas guys, and the Colts are second on the list to acquire Aaron Rodgers. So deal with that.
I'd rather not.
I know, right? I'd rather not too. So it's up to Chris Ballard and Ed Dodds and that entire front office to get your quarterback, to find who you want, and then to go get him. If it's in the draft, if maybe Chicago, I've heard reports that they might be thinking about trading Justin Fields. If they are truly wowed by one of the quarterbacks in this draft, you get Fields, you get Lamar Jackson. I don't know, but this has got to be the season where you get the guy. And the first year is going to be probably rocky. You have to stick with the guy. You've got to maintain consistency from year to year. That's something we've heard from players as to, like, we ask them what's going wrong from year to year, and they keep saying the same thing. Well, you change quarterbacks every year. You have to stop the carousel. It has to stop. You have to pick a guy. You have to stay with the guy. You have to build with a head coach and a quarterback and an offensive coordinator from one year to the next and improve from one year to the next. Figure out what works well. Even if there are lumps, even if you have issues, you have to go into the next year. You have to stick with it, not cut bait, and go on, push on, and try to reach your potential.
And quit talking about multiple Lombardi trophies.
Yeah.
Because yes, that's the ultimate goal.
It's not helping.
It's not. And what we've seen, and this came up in Chris Ballard's press conference too, and it's 100% accurate, this team, as it is built, does not handle attaboys. It doesn't. It handles 1-5 and 1-4 and fighting your butt off to get back in it. It does not handle being a favorite, and why that is, I don't know, but it doesn't.
I'll tell you right now, there's no one who's thinking of the Colts as a favorite right now. So they're 4-12-1 and entering a season that we will see some significant changes, no doubt, to the roster, to the coaching staff. And at this time in early May when they gather, this year rather in early May when they gather for rookie minicamps, that is going to be a thrilling time, I think, to be a Colts fan, because you're going to have gone through free agency, you're going to have gone through the draft, and at that time, then it's optimism looking forward. Even if you're going to go through some lumps, you have a clear vision of what's happening in the future. And now, Chap, we're at the point where we're trying to figure out the vision. So there's a lot of, hey, wait and see, be patient. But hey, we're still going to be here on the Colts Blue Zone podcast, online at Colts Blue Zone, on Twitter, to really kind of guide you through the process and over the next couple months.
Nothing tells you that you're sort of just kind of hovering, in that everyone is convinced that your starting quarterback next September is not on the roster. You know, Ryan's not going to be here. Foles isn't going to be here. Probably Sam will be, probably. But it's a complete reboot, and they need a reboot, and it has to happen this offseason.
We appreciate you listening to this version of the Colts Blue Zone podcast. The offseason is here, and I think we might make Wednesdays consistent looking forward to this offseason. That's what we've done in the past. So we'll see between Wednesday and Thursday, but we'll be sure to let you know once again online on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone what our plans are throughout the week. And stay updated there for Colts news and notes throughout the week. And, hey, we're at the point right now with the head coaching search. There's going to be stuff that probably comes out on the daily or on the hourly about who's going to be interviewed here, there, and everywhere in the search. And what the Bears want to do at number one, that's going to be fun over the next couple weeks to see if the Colts do have the ammo to compete with the other teams to move up. Really looking forward to these next couple weeks of Colts coverage, and we hope you guys join us along the way as well. You can follow Mike Chappell on fox59.com, CBS4Indy.com. Get his articles there. Also on Twitter at mchappell51. Joe Hopkins, I'm Dave Griffiths at DaveG_sports. We'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.